The fabric of the angel realm did not tear like cloth, it shattered like porcelain. For an eternity, or perhaps only a moment, there was absolute silence in the Omni King's palace, a structure that now belonged to the Platinum Dragon King. Son Goku sat upon the throne that once hovered above the 12 universes, his eyes closed, his breathing slow and rhythmic. He was no longer the mortal Saiyan who sought the thrill of a simple brawl. He was the anchor of existence, his scales shimmering with a light that transcended the simple gold of Super Saiyan or the silver of Ultra Instinct. He was platinum. He was absolute. The angels Weiss and Vados stood at the foot of the throne, their heads bowed in a reverence born of survival rather than tradition. The multiverse was calm. The chaotic erasure of the Zenos had ended. Order had been imposed by the will of a dragon. But then the sound came. It was not a thunderclap, nor an explosion. It was the sickening, high-pitched scream of reality being tortured. Above the floating palace, the infinite kaleidoscope of the null space turned gray. The vibrant colors of the cosmos drained away, leaving only a cold, monochromatic dread. Goku opened his eyes. His vertical dragon pupils contracted, not out of fear, but out of a primal recognition, an instinct that predated the stars themselves. The unbreakable sky of the world of void developed a hairline fracture. It jagged across the horizon like a wound on a god's skin, bleeding a darkness so profound it seemed to eat the light around it. The air grew heavy, smelling of ozone and ancient dust. Whis fell to one knee, clutching his staff, his usually composed face twisting into a mask of unadulterated horror. This was not a disruption of order, it was the return of the thing that existed before order was ever conceived. The sky was not just breaking, it was opening. Before the abyss swallows the light of this new era, anchor your soul to this timeline. Subscribe and summon your energy, lest the history of the Dragon King be erased by the void. The throne of the Omni King did not possess a back to lean against, for a god of absolute authority was never meant to rest. It hovered in the center of the null space, a singular point of white geometry suspended in the endless swirling kaleidoscope of the world of void. For eons, this seat had been occupied by the childlike whims of Zeno, a being who erased galaxies as easily as a toddler crushes a toy. But the child was gone. In his place sat a statue of living metal, a sovereign carved from the raw determination of a mortal who had refused to die. Son Goku sat motionless. He did not breathe in the way mortals did, gasping for oxygen to fuel blood. Instead, the surrounding cosmos breathed into him. His chest rose and fell in a slow, tidal rhythm that seemed to dictate the rotation of the 12 universes beneath him. He was no longer clad in the orange G of the turtle hermit, nor the battle-worn armor of his Saiyan heritage. His skin had hardened into an impenetrable mesh of platinum scales, shimmering with a luster that was neither cold nor warm, but simply absolute. His hair, once a wild mane of black, had settled into a flowing crystalline silver, heavy and regal, draping over his shoulders like a mantle of starlight. Below the throne, the floor of the palace was polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the terrifying majesty of the new Dragon King. Two figures stood on that reflective surface, their heads bowed low, their eyes fixed on the ground. Weiss and Vados, once the teachers and caretakers of the multiverse's strongest warriors, were now silent sentinels. Their halos, usually spinning with the carefree energy of the angelic race, rotated slowly, dimmed by the overwhelming presence of the being above them. The hierarchy of existence had not just shifted, it had been violently inverted. The student had not only surpassed the masters, he had become the very law they were sworn to uphold. There was a profound loneliness in this perfection. The silence of the palace was thick, heavy enough to crush a lesser soul. It was the silence of a victory so complete that it left no room for celebration. Goku's eyes were closed, His consciousness expanded to the furthest edges of the 12th universe, watching the cycle of life and death play out in the mortal realms. He saw civilizations rise on planet Sadala. He felt the tectonic shifts of New Namek. He heard the prayers whispered to gods who no longer answered, for the gods themselves now answered to him. He had brought peace. The eras of destruction, of Zeno's capricious erasure, were over. He was the platinum shield, the immutable wall between existence and oblivion. Yet, deep within the hardened casing of the dragon god, the ghost of a Saiyan stirred. It was a faint, restless pulse, the desire for the heat of battle, for the metallic taste of blood, for the thrill of pushing against a wall that refused to move. But there were no walls left. He had shattered the angel realm. He had devoured the super Dragon Balls. He had stared down the Omni Kings and remained standing. He was the ceiling of reality. To be the strongest was to be alone in a way that death could never rival. "My lord," Whist's voice broke the silence, soft and melodic, yet laced with a hesitation that never existed before the rebellion. "The equilibrium of the 7th universe is stabilizing. The energy density is optimal." Goku did not open his eyes. His voice, when it came, did not travel through the air but resonated directly in the minds of the angels, a dual-tone vibration of human warmth and draconic growl. "Good. Let them rest, Whis. Let them build." "As you command," Whis replied, bowing lower. The formality was painful. It was a scar on the history of their friendship, a reminder that the day Goku ascended was the day he ceased to be merely Goku. It was in that moment of absolute stillness that the vibration began. It did not originate from the universes below, nor from the angels standing before him. It came from outside. It was not a sound. Sound required a medium to travel, and this disturbance ignored physics entirely. It was a shudder in the fabric of the narrative itself. Goku's platinum eyelids snapped open. His pupils, vertical slits of burning crimson, dilated instantly. The serene atmosphere of the palace curdled. The air tasted suddenly stale, like the inside of a tomb that had been sealed for 1 billion years. The Platinum Dragon King felt a sensation he had not felt since he was a child facing the Demon King Piccolo. A cold, slithering dread that crawled up his spine and settled in the base of his neck. Something was scratching at the door of the multiverse, and the scratching was getting louder. The reaction of the world of void was visceral, like an organism rejecting a foreign pathogen. The infinite kaleidoscope of swirling colors, the mesmerizing purples, greens, and nebulous blues that served as the backdrop for the Zeno Palace, began to blanch. It started at the zenith. Directly above the floating arena of the gods, a gray necrosis spreading outward like ink dropped into clear water. The vibrant hum of the cosmos, the background radiation that sang the song of existence, was choked off, replaced by a low, dissonant frequency that made the teeth ache and the vision blur. Whis and Vados recoiled, their halos flickering violently. For the first time in millennia, the angels looked mortal. They gripped their staffs with knuckles white from strain, their divine senses screaming warnings that they could not comprehend. "What is this?" Vados whispered, her voice losing its usual cool detachment. "The void. It is dying." "No," Goku murmured, rising from his throne. His movement was fluid, the shifting of a mountain range. The platinum scales covering his body flared with a protective light, casting long, sharp shadows across the darkening floor. "It's not dying. It's afraid." Above them, the sky screamed. A crack appeared in the zenith. It was jagged and ugly, a violation of the perfect geometry of the multiverse. It didn't look like a tear in space. It looked like a fracture in a lens. From the fissure, no light emerged. Instead, darkness bled out. Not the darkness of night, which is simply the absence of light, but a thick, pressurized obscurity. It was a tangible, oily shadow that dripped down toward the palace, heavy with the weight of forgotten time. The physics of the realm began to unravel. The floating pillars of the palace groaned as gravity inverted, then doubled, then vanished entirely. Debris from the shattered pillars began to float upward, dissolving into dust as it touched the gray mist. The light from the stars of the 12 universes, visible as distant pinpricks, snuffed out one by one, as if a great hand were closing over the cosmos. Goku stepped down from the dais, his dragon tail lashing behind him, the heavy thud of it hitting the floor, the only rhythmic sound in the chaos. He looked up, his crimson eyes locking onto the widening rift. He could feel the energy pouring from it, ancient, stale, and overwhelmingly hostile. It felt like the opposite of Kai. If Kai was the energy of life and vigor, this was the energy of stagnation and entropy. It was the cold dust that remained after the last star had burned out. "Prepare yourselves," Goku commanded, his voice hardening into the roar of a king. "My lord, our staffs." Whis stammered, staring at the orb atop his scepter. The light within it was dead. "The angelic link. It has been severed. We are cut off from the guide state." Panic, raw and unfiltered, flashed in the angel's eyes. They were beings of hierarchy, their power derived from the Grand Priest and the system of the Zenos. With the system compromised, they were like candles in a hurricane. The crack widened with a sound like a planetary crust snapping. The rift tore open fully, forming a gaping maw in the sky, a vertical eye of absolute blackness staring down at the usurper's throne. The temperature plummeted instantly. Frost began to creep across the platinum scales of Goku's arms, an impossibility. He burned with the power of 1,000 suns, yet this chill ignored his heat. It was the cold of the grave. From the depths of that abyss, footsteps echoed. Thum, thum, thum. They were heavy, deliberate steps, walking on nothingness as if it were solid stone. With each footfall, the gray necrosis of the sky pulsed. The dread that filled the palace condensed, becoming a physical weight that pressed down on the lungs. The angels fell to their knees, not out of reverence this time, but because their legs simply refused to support them under the crushing density of the aura approaching them. Goku stood his ground. He clenched his fists, the platinum armor groaning under the tension of his own muscles. He bared his teeth, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest, a warning to the darkness. But even the Dragon King, the slayer of angels and the consumer of Dragon Balls, felt a shiver of doubt crawl through his immortal heart. Something was coming that did not care about power levels. Something was coming that remembered when the universe was just a whisper. He did not fly. He did not teleport. He descended as if the air itself formed a staircase for his feet, obligated to support his weight. From the bleeding rift, a silhouette emerged. He was wrapped in robes of tattered twilight, fabrics that seemed woven from the shredded horizons of erased timelines. They hung loosely on a frame that was deceptively slender, yet radiated a density that warped the light around him. As he stepped fully into the dim light of the palace, the features of the intruder became visible, and the horror of his identity struck the angels like a physical blow. He resembled the Omni King, Zeno, but in the way a wolf resembles a pug. The same oval-shaped head, the same diminutive stature, but stripped of all innocence, all color, all childish wonder. His skin was not the vibrant blue and purple of the Zenos, but a pale, sickly gray, like ash from a crematorium. His eyes were not wide and blank. They were narrow, sunken pits of black sclera with irises of piercing, malevolent white. On his chest, where the Zenos bore the kanji for all, Quan, this being bore a different symbol, an archaic, jagged rune that hurt the eyes to look at. It was the mark of the void, Akumo, the progenitor, the father of Zeno, the king who sat on the throne before time was counted. He carried no staff, no weapon. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture one of supreme, arrogant relaxation. Yet the air around him rotted. As his foot touched the pristine floor of the palace, the white tiles instantly turned black and crumbled into dust, the decay spreading outward in a rapid web. "So," Akumo spoke. The word did not travel through the air, it manifested inside their skulls. It was a voice like grinding stones, dry and ancient. "This is what has become of my garden." He stopped 10 paces from Goku. The size difference was comical. Goku, a towering armored dragon god, and Akumo, a small gray entity. But the shadow Akumo cast was enormous, stretching out to swallow the throne behind Goku. Akumo's gaze drifted past Goku, ignoring him entirely, and landed on the kneeling, trembling forms of Whis and Vados. His lip curled in disgust, a human expression on an alien face that made it all the more unsettling. "Angels," Akumo spat. The word was an insult. "Tools I forged to keep the weeds in check, and now look at you, kneeling before a monkey wrapped in lizard skin." He turned his head slowly, his neck cracking with the sound of dry wood, and finally looked up at Goku. The contact was electric. The moment their eyes met, the palace shook violently. The atmosphere screamed as two absolute authorities clashed, the platinum authority of the dragon and the primordial authority of the void. "You," Akumo said, his white eyes narrowing, "you sit in the chair of the All-King. You wear the skin of the dragon Zalama, the heretic I cast into the depths. You smell of theft, mortal." Goku did not flinch. The Saiyan within him was screaming for violence, but the Dragon King held him steady. He could feel the depth of Akumo's power. It wasn't an ocean. It was a black hole. It had no bottom. "I am Son Goku," he replied, his voice a resonant baritone that pushed back against the crushing pressure. "I am the guardian of this era. If you've come to destroy, you will leave disappointed." Akumo tilted his head, a dry, rasping sound escaping his throat. It took a moment to realize he was laughing. "Guardian?" Akumo chuckled, the sound devoid of mirth. "You are a squatter in a house you do not understand. You think because you killed my sons, because you slaughtered the Grand Priest, that you have won? You have merely broken the lock on my cage." He took a step forward. The pressure in the room doubled. The floor beneath Goku's feet cracked. "I am not here to destroy, little dragon," Akumo whispered, the darkness around him flaring like a cold fire. "I am here to correct a mistake. I am here to reclaim what is mine. And you are simply in my seat." Akumo did not raise a hand. He did not charge energy in the way a warrior would, gathering light into a sphere or sharpening ki into a blade. He simply widened his eyes. The universe did not explode, it ceased. For Whis and Vados, the sensation was instantaneous and total. One moment, they were angels, beings of supreme reflex, masters of the autonomous ultra instinct that allowed the body to move without thought. In the next, they were statues. The connection between their minds and their divine limbs was severed, not by a technique, but by a command of authority that superseded their biology. "Ku!" Whis gasped, the sound strangled in his throat. The halo hovering around his neck, the symbol of his station and his link to the angelic realm, sputtered like a dying neon light. It flickered once, twice, and then shattered into motes of gray dust. Vados collapsed beside him, her staff clattering to the dissolving floor, her eyes wide with a terror that an angel was never meant to feel, the terror of mortality. They were not being attacked. They were being switched off. The presence of Akumo was a jamming signal that drowned out the frequency of their existence. But Goku stood. The Platinum Dragon King groaned, a sound of tectonic grinding deep within his chest. His knees buckled slightly, the sheer density of Akumo's gaze pressing down on him with the weight of a collapsing star system. But he did not fall. The platinum scales covering his body flared with blinding luminosity, a desperate, radiant shield against the encroaching gray. The clash was silent but cataclysmic. Around Goku, the air distorted. His aura, usually a majestic flow of 7-colored light, was being compressed, pushed back toward his skin. The void that Akumo projected was not simply darkness, it was anti-creation. It sought to undo the very concept of energy. Where Goku's aura touched Akumo's influence, the light hissed and evaporated. "Oh?" Akumo's voice drifted through the pressure, mild and unimpressed. "You resist. How irritating." The progenitor took a single step forward. Crack! The sound came from Goku's chest. A hairline fracture appeared on his platinum breastplate, the armor that had withstood the erasure of 2 Zenos. Goku grit his teeth, blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. It was not red blood, nor was it the golden ichor of gods. It was a shimmering, mercury-like substance, the lifeblood of the dragon god. "You think your scales protect you?" Akumo asked, his voice getting closer, though he barely seemed to move. "You think because you swallowed the balls of Zalama, you are immortal? Zalama was a craftsman. I am the canvas. You cannot paint a picture if the canvas refuses to hold the ink." Goku realized the horror of his situation. In his battle against the Zenos, he had survived because their erasure was a universal law, and the Super Dragon Balls granted him immunity to those laws. He was an outlaw who could not be judged by the court. But Akumo was not the court. Akumo was the empty lot where the courthouse was built. He didn't use laws. He used the nothingness that preceded them. Goku's immunity meant nothing here because Akumo wasn't attacking him with energy or magic. He was attacking him with the fundamental truth that he shouldn't exist. Goku snarled, forcing his head up, locking his vertical crimson pupils onto Akumo's dead white voids. "I exist, right here!" With a roar that shook the foundations of the rotting palace, Goku forced his ki outward. He didn't just push, he detonated. "Dragon Thunder!" A shockwave of platinum lightning erupted from Goku's body. It was the roar of the primal dragon, a sound that birthed stars. The blast tore through the heavy atmosphere, temporarily pushing back the gray fog. For a microsecond, the color returned to the world. The pressure lifted. Whis gasped, sucking in a desperate breath of air. But the lightning didn't hit Akumo. It curved around him. The bolts of absolute power bent away from the small gray figure, fearful of touching him. Akumo stood untouched in the center of the storm, his robes barely fluttering. He looked at Goku not with anger, but with the clinical disappointment of a man watching a bug struggle on a pin. "Loud," Akumo whispered. The word hit Goku like a physical hammer. The lightning vanished instantly, snubbed out. The pressure returned tenfold. Goku was slammed backward, his boots carving deep trenches into the disintegrating floor. He skid to a halt at the foot of his throne, panting, smoke rising from his scales. Akumo stood over the fallen angels, his shadow stretching long and terrible over the king. "You have played king long enough, Saiyan," Akumo said, raising one gray hand palm open. "The game is over. The void does not negotiate with the spark. It swallows it." The voice of the Void King did not come from his mouth. It resonated from the cracks in the sky, from the dust on the floor, and from the darkening blood in Goku's veins. It was a surround sound judgment, inescapable and absolute. "You look at me with hate," Akumo observed, his hands still clasped behind his back, walking slowly toward the dais where Goku struggled to rise. "But I do not hate you, son Goku. One does not hate the mold that grows on bread. One simply scrapes it off." Goku planted a hand on the ground, his fingers digging into the dissolving tile. The platinum scales on his arm were dull, the luster fading under the oppressive proximity of the progenitor. He forced air into his lungs, his chest heaving. "I am not mold. Are you not?" Akumo stopped at the foot of the stairs. He looked up, his face impassive, a gray mask of indifference. "My son, Zeno, was a child. A foolish, lonely child who created toys to distract himself from the eternal dark. He painted galaxies, breathed life into mud, and called it creation. He made a mess." Akumo gestured to the 12 universes floating in the void below, spheres of light that were now dimming rapidly. I allowed him his playtime. I allowed him to build his little hierarchy, the angels, the destroyers, the Kais. It was amusing. But then the toys started to think they were real. And you? Akumo's eyes narrowed, the white irises flaring. You are the worst of them. A mortal who consumed the power of a dragon god, a glitch in the software of reality. You sit there pretending that your protection matters, but you are guarding a daydream. Goku stood. It was a slow, agonizing movement. The gravity of the void pinned him down, demanding submission. But the Saiyan will, tempered by the pride of a dragon, refused to bend. He stood to his full height, the platinum armor groaning as it reformed. The crimson light in his vertical pupils burned through the gray fog. Zeno might have been a child, Goku rasped, his voice gaining strength, transforming from a wheeze into a growl. But what he made, the lives in those universes, they are real. They fight, they love, they survive. Goku took a step down the stairs, then another. I didn't take this throne because I wanted power, Goku declared, his aura beginning to flicker back to life. Not the explosive roar of before, but a dense, concentrated burn. I took it because someone had to stop the erasure. I took it to let them live. And that is your crime, Akumo replied softly. Existence is pain, dragon. Consciousness is a tragedy. By keeping them alive, you merely prolong their suffering. I am not here to rule them. I am here to close the book. Akumo raised his right hand. The gray mist swirling around the palace condensed into his palm, forming a sphere of absolute nothingness. It was a black hole, but worse. It was a deletion key. I declare you a usurper, Akumo pronounced, the verdict echoing across the dying multiverse. You are a thief wearing a crown of stolen light, and the punishment for theft is retrieval. Try it, Goku roared. The restraint broke. The Platinum Dragon King did not wait for the judgment to fall. He launched himself from the stairs, shattering the dais into dust. He moved faster than time, a streak of silver and red colliding with the wall of static gray. Goku pulled his fist back, the platinum scales on his knuckles retracting to reveal claws of pure energy. He poured everything he had, the power of the Saiyan, the magic of the dragon, the technique of the angel, into a single desperate strike aimed right at Akumo's face. Dragon King, smash! The fist connected. Or it should have. Instead of an impact, there was a sound like a heavy door slamming shut. The entire Zeno palace, the symbol of absolute authority for millions of years, cracked down the middle. The shockwave blew Whis and Vados off the edge of the arena, sending them tumbling into the abyss. Dust and void energy swirled in a chaotic vortex, obscuring the vision. For a moment, there was only the roar of conflicting energies, the screech of light fighting against the dark. Then the dust settled. Goku's fist was stopped. Akumo had caught it. He held Goku's platinum fist in his small gray hand, his fingers wrapped effortlessly around the Dragon King's knuckles. Akumo hadn't moved an inch. The force of Goku's blow, enough to shatter a dimension, had been absorbed completely into the void. Akumo looked up at the horrified dragon god, a small, cruel smile finally touching his lips. Is that all? Akumo whispered. Then the war is already over. Behind Akumo, the rift in the sky tore open completely. From the bleeding wound of the cosmos, thousands of red eyes ignited in the darkness. The army of the fallen angels had arrived. The abyssal war had begun.